Emmenuel for all the organising. Thank you all for being here. So first up, we have a very special guest, Ben Westwood, who is the son of our friend, the late, great Vivian. Can we have a round for Vivian Westwood?
Thank you. I tried to come on the march, but I got stuck in all this traffic in my car. It was mad. Anyway. So, I first met Julian through a publicity stunt I did in 2014. I mentioned that I was going to do a fashion show in the Ecuadorian embassy with Julian modelling. This garnered a lot of interest, and I was even interviewed on Channel 4 News. I wore a t-shirt created by my mother saying, "I am Julian Assange," a reference from the film Spartacus, showing solidarity with Julian's work. In the 2 years after this, I and my wife made regular visits to the embassy to deliver meals that she had prepared, and we met Julian several more times with my mother.
Beautiful! Thank you!
The last time... Very nice food, sushi and whatever. He kept losing all the bento boxes as well. He never gave us them back. Yeah. So the last time I saw him was when we took our newborn son to meet him, and it was an honour to have Julian cuddle him. Julian is a hero, a dubious honour I am sure. He fights for democracy by revealing official secrets and conversations behind the screen. For without facts, how can the truth be found? And how can informed decisions be made by the people? The very allowance of the idea of classified secrets is a corruption of democracy. However, it is the modus operandi of our present undemocratic system, conveniently there to hide anything it wants to, under the guise of protecting our national interests, we are told. How easy this makes it to manipulate the people. In a democracy, there should be no secrets. Any truly democratic government needs to be completely transparent. Why should the people not be involved directly with their own interests, national or otherwise? It turns out that Julian's WikiLeaks reveals the answer to this. The national interests do not support the people. They support private interests. The national bit is just there to provide the excuse to hide the truth. And war is the worst example of this. All wars start from a lie, I've heard Julian say. War is also a very convenient method to suspend and modify people's democratic rights and to restrict information, without which it is easy to manufacture a war. Catch-22. These days, whenever I hear a Western leader speaking in praise of democracy or espousing the right of journalistic freedom, as in the recent case of arrested Belarusian journalist Roman Protasevich, I am revolted and want to shout Julian Assange at them for their hypocritical double talk. It's a shame that no journalist will do this, although the example of Chris Hedges illustrates why they don't. This double talk is also illustrated by the recent report from the UN regarding China and its treatment of the Uyghurs. Western governments jumped on this, espousing the merits of the UN. However, when Niels Metzler, UN rapporteur on torture, demanded the immediate release and compensation of Julian, the British government said the UN should mind its own business. These people have only their own rotten interests in mind, and none in democracy. The world needs Julian.
Yes!
Thank you, Ben. Next up, we have the one and only, the legend, that is Jeremy Corbyn.
Showing your love and support. I haven't gone away. I'm right here. But, my friend, I haven't gone away. I'm not going away anywhere. We are part of the same struggle for human rights, justice and peace all around the world. That's why we're here today. That's what we spend our time campaigning doing. And I want to say thank you to all of you for being here tonight. Thank you for this wonderful platform we've got here tonight. And thank you for the joy and the verve of the carnival atmosphere and promoting carnival in support of Julian. Because you win campaigns by gaining friends. You gain friends by going out in an exuberant, musical, artistic way, as well as the very strong, very powerful intellectual and legal arguments that we've got to pursue. You have to campaign on all fronts, at all levels, all of the time, to win justice for Julian Assange. And that is what we're doing. Of most of the British media that they've completely ignored the whole issue. They don't seem to understand that one of the biggest media stories in the world was going on literally within a few metres of some of their offices when the court cases were going on, and no doubt there will be many court cases in the future. They do not seem to understand that Julian's vilification by the US government, by the British government and by many others, is part of a strategy to divide people away from understanding what he's about and supporting his case. Julian's crime, so-called, was to tell the truth. Tell the truth about what US military power actually means. To tell the truth about what oppressive governments of all sorts do against their opposition. To tell the truth about the way in which big business is more interested in exploitation of the poorest countries in the world than preserving or protecting the environment or the human rights of the people that live in different places around the world. So Julian's message and information was of crucial importance to good, decent people all around the world standing up for human rights and justice. But in the silencing of Julian, and that's what it's all about, it is also, in effect, the silencing of real journalists all around the world. Self-censorship takes over following the imprisonment of Julian Assange. The freedom of Julian Assange is the freedom for every real journalist all over the world to report the truth of what is really going on. And so it was, to me, a quite moving experience when I was invited to go to Washington last month to join in the Belmarsh Tribunal that we held in the National Press Club in Washington. National Press Club within a few meters of the White House, of Congress, and all the great institutions of the USA. And it was that place, that building, that room where Julian showed the footage of the US commanders instructing people to be killed without checking who they were, what they were, and they, we believe, knew perfectly well they were wholly innocent civilians that were killed by high technology power. In this case it was Iraqis, but it could also be Afghan people, it could also be Somalis, it could also be Yemen, it could also be Palestinians, it could be people in all sorts of places in the world. That Julian's skill and brilliance helped to expose the vile nature of what control actually means. And he showed it in that room, and that is why we had this event in the National Press Club. It was packed out and it was live streamed to a lot of people all over the world. And whilst the British media and most of the British political establishment and elected politicians are not saying a great deal about Julian, it is not the case elsewhere. My good friend Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the president of Mexico, spoke out from the very beginning on this. And when I was in Mexico with him in last January, we went to the Mañanera, his daily press conference, and he then dedicated a large chunk of his daily press conference to Julian's case, raised it directly with Biden and offered Julian, if he wanted it, sanctuary in Mexico. And because he set that example, others have joined in. And it was wonderful to see Lula Ignacio da Silva elected as president of Brazil, and straight away to come out in support of Julian Assange. You have the presidents of two very large, very important populous countries of Latin America. You also have the support of President Petro in Colombia and many others. So we are building up international support, and the campaign in the United States, in Australia, in Europe and many other places is very important. And last month at the Council of Europe, which I'm a member of in Strasbourg, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, we had an event for Julian. I was not expecting it to be so successful. Absolutely ram-packed to hear what Stella and others had to say. And that evening there was an event in the National Theatre in Strasbourg, absolutely full also. People want to hear Julian's story. They need to hear Julian's story. The personal story, stuck in this horrible place of Belmarsh prison, isolated, unable to act in any kind of normal way, and he is a remand prisoner. Normally remand prisoners are either released on bail or given pretty good conditions in order to await any kind of process. Julian is a remand prisoner in the most awful conditions, in the most maximum of maximum security prisons in this country. And then, if he's allowed to be removed to the United States, he will face a 175-year prison sentence, a death sentence, because that is what it is. It's up to us now, around the world, to raise the voice for Julian, and in raising that voice for Julian, we're raising the voice for truth, for peace and justice around the world. And you know what? This campaign is long, it's hard, it's detailed, and it's enormous pressure on Stella and all those that are central to this campaign. So put your arms around them, give them the support and love they need and deserve, and put your arms around everyone else to get them to join in this campaign, to free this innocent man, that the truth may be told of the way in which the poorest and most oppressed people in the world are treated. And I'll finish with this. When all the horrors of 9/11 happened, followed by the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, trillions and trillions has been spent on military expenditure. Billions has gone into the war in Afghanistan. The troops and military have now been withdrawn, and what's left behind? The poorest, most devastated place with the greatest denial of human rights of almost anywhere in the world. Military solutions don't usually work. It has to be about understanding the paranoia of those in power to protect their power, irrespective of the cost on innocent people who have no one to speak out for them. Julian spoke out for the innocent victims all around the world of unaccountable military power. Thank you, Julian, for all you did. Thank you for all your support for this campaign. Let's get Julian out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I think there's a peace demo in a couple of weeks. And there's that famous quote of Julian's, if wars can be started by lies, maybe peace can be started by truth. Up next, we have someone that you've probably seen in the news over the last few years, an amazing campaigner who campaigned for his wife, Nazanin, who was imprisoned in Iran. We have Richard Ratcliffe. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, as you know, I am Richard Ratcliffe. I'm the husband of Nazanin Ratcliffe. Now essentially a retired campaigner, which is a lovely place to be.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
I mean, why am I here? I'm here partly, I think, as a point of hope. We had a very long struggle for years. I don't think we thought it would last for years, but it went on, and we had lovely euphoric moments like this, where we had lots of people at events, and we'd come away all elated and hopeful and just knowing that it was going to happen. And then we have really dark times where it just, we wrapped our brains as to what to do, and it felt like the media didn't care, and it felt like stories would disappear, and sit with the lawyers, scratching our heads, not knowing what to do, and stories like Nazanin's, stories like Julian's are quite simple, and you can struggle as a family to work out what's blocking it, what to do. It was really important for me and for Nazanin to be here, just to say at a simple level, it does end one day. It doesn't end easily, it doesn't end without lots of honest people caring and seeing and writing and shouting and all the things that everyone in this room is doing and people around the world are doing. But it does end. I remember coming along there was an event outside Parliament where we made a chain around us, a really beautiful event. And there was, I think it was Sky TV coming up, and they asked me, what are you doing here? And they meant it not in a hostile way, they're kind of we all exist in boxes, so Nazanin's story was in one box, and Julian's story was in another box, and one's over there and one's over here, and it's in some ways a good question. Part of my journey from being a sort of a middle-class accountant that did not come along to political events was discovering the connections between all sorts of injustices. And cases are different. None of them are the same. I don't mean to sort of elide it all. But there is a way in which, at the human level, I don't know if anyone heard Stella on the radio over Christmas, but her describing the experience of going to visit Julian in prison and taking the boys and what that's like, trying to protect them from everything and to keep it human and normal, and also to protect Julian and to keep that connection to the outside world and that connection to still being a dad, and that there is life and colour outside those grey walls. Well, that was a very similar experience for Nazanin as well. It is an experience that transcends all sorts of prisons and prisoners and all sorts of injustice. So there's a way in which I know I felt for our family when we suddenly went down this rabbit hole and what we thought we knew went upside down. We really struggled with the fact that lots of friends felt it too dangerous to stay in touch, and not so much in the UK, but in Iran, lots of friends did. And that kind of being a pariah and watching how your family's story and your family's humanity gets distorted. It's a lonely business. It's really important that we recognise each other's humanity. We recognise the fact that, the importance of not being left alone. It can't be understated. I think the other thing to say in terms of connections, I remember when Jeremy mentioned before he went off, the UN ruled in Nazanin's case that she had been arbitrarily detained, and that the UN demanded her release, and I couldn't get the UK to call for her release. I couldn't get the UK to acknowledge that UN ruling, and that was precisely because Julian had a ruling, and they didn't want to be called out as hypocrites. Of course, Iran would point to Julian's case and say, listen, you know, you do it, we do it. You know, everyone can throw names at each other, but we all have difficult prisoners that we have to manage. And that way in which, you know, the UK didn't want to be called hypocrites, but the hypocrisy of human rights, making them as something as disposable for particular cases, does mean that we're all less safe, that there is a race to the bottom. And there's a way in which Julian's case very literally told for Nazanin and tolls for the safety of everyone in this room. That's not a freedom of speech issue, that's just the basics of you know, whether rule of law matters anymore. The other thing to say, and this is just from our own personal experience, I don't think I ever knew when Nazanin would come home. I think I felt, and it's true with all campaigning, that, you know, Jeremy made a very good point, that campaigning needs friends. The more friends you build, the greater it grows. It's a kind of a ripple that just, you know, you keep throwing stones in the pond and it keeps rippling, and you hope the circles get big enough, and you don't know when big enough is. And I always felt that if enough people cared, the right people will care enough. That will be true. That was true in our case. It will be true in Julian's case. You don't know if it's tomorrow. You don't know if it's next week. You don't know if it's next year. You don't know if it's, you know, ages away. And in some ways, that's, you know, living day to day. It's better not to look too far into the future. You know, it's a long old slog, and you have to keep going. And you know, I think the most important part of, you know, you guys being here, this event, the solidarity that it represents, it is exactly that point that Jeremy said about the cradling that you need as a family to come through with this. This is an experience of profound cruelty at some level. It is something that, you know, I don't know how much Julian is ever aware of all the care that's outside. For Nazanin dimly, right? So they should be aware of some things, some not. Some things would get in, and he's actually not here anymore, but once we did a hunger strike in front of, one in front of the Foreign Office and one in front of the Iranian Embassy. The one in front of the Iranian Embassy, Jeremy actually came down and brought some coffee with him and said, this is for Nazanin, just coffee. Now, it took a long time to get that coffee to Iran and to smuggle that coffee into, but we got that coffee into prison. And for Nazanin, and for all her cellmates, the fact that someone they knew from outside, you know, an important person that they've seen on television, had sent them coffee, and they would very occasionally sit in the yard and drink it, and it would just be a reminder that, you know, of a connection to a world outside, a world of, you know, normality. When we all live normal lives, for them in there, and that, you know, there was colour beyond the grey walls. Part of what you guys do here with the colour of the carnival and everything else is a way of giving, if nothing else, stories for people to take to Julian, for him to know that, you know, he won't know half of it, but he will know. I think also, you know, and Nazanin's not here today. She's not here today partly because it's a bumpy journey back to normal afterwards. You know, it's, I say, it's a rough old experience that we went through, incomparable to what Julian's been through in some ways. He'll get better, he'll get beyond it, but it won't be day one afterwards. It'll be forwards and backwards and so on. In that experience of cruelty, the importance of discovering that world of care, that world of support, that world of solidarity, that, you know, at the end, lots of people kept battling and keep battling until he came home. It's almost like a sort of a photo album or a wedding of all those messages and support and solidarity. And it's a reminder that in the midst of all that cruelty, there's a world of kindness, there's a world that does believe in justice, and it's the world that's represented here today. So I'm honoured to be here with you all, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Richard. And next up we have the Editor-in-Chief of WikiLeaks, Kristin Hraffson.
Thank you, Richard. And next up we have the Editor-in-Chief of WikiLeaks, Kristin Hraffson. Thank you, Richard. And next up we have the Editor-in-Chief of WikiLeaks, Kristin Hraffson. Thank you, Richard. And next up we have the Editor-in-Chief of WikiLeaks, Kristin Hraffson.
much. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the thousands that marched this afternoon. In solidarity, we are joining forces. We're sending a signal to the world. And we are sending a signal of hope to Julian Assange in Belmarsh. This will be over soon. We are growing in numbers, despite the fact that the media in this country is avoiding the topic, obviously. And if you want to know how many actually were marching this afternoon in the carnival, keep in mind that when we encircled Parliament, we had calculated that it would take at least 5,000 people to form a human chain, which we succeeded, and we have the evidence. It was a great achievement. Some of the local newspapers here in this city reported that a few hundred had showed up. So if you want to know the real number of those who marched, look for the papers this evening or tomorrow and multiply it by 4 or 5. That's probably closer to the truth. We are growing in number, and the support is growing all around the world. We don't know when the next step will be in the courts here in the case of Julian. They are taking an awful long time in deciding whether they will hear his appeal or not. It is spurious, to say the least. I have long ago lost all faith that justice can be had in the courtrooms here. That will not just be enough to fight in the courts. And because we know that this is a political persecution that has to be solved through political pressure, WikiLeaks decided to go on a tour to Latin America in the last few weeks. We met policymakers, we met human rights activists, we met press freedom activists, artists, and presidents in 5 countries. It was astonishing and refreshing to go through these countries and not be met with skepticism. All the media in these countries showed interest in the topics. You did not have to convince anybody about the fact that it's not a conspiracy theory, but a fact that the CIA was plotting to kidnap and assassinate Julian Assange in 2017. People in Latin America know fully well what the CIA is capable of. We did not have to convince Lula da Silva, who met us a month after he was elected president, that a massive lawfare was waged against Julian Assange. Lula da Silva spent himself more than 500 days in prison because of a lawfare. He knows, and there is documented evidence, that the Department of Justice in the United States had a hand in that lawfare against Lula. Now he is president. He is a supporter of Julian Assange because he knows what he is up against. Jeremy mentioned López Obrador, the Mexican president, which we met, Joseph Farrell, my friend and colleague, and I. And we sat with him for 2 hours. López Obrador has been a supporter of Julian for a long time. We met him a few days before a trilateral North American meeting was held in Mexico City. And the Mexican president met Joe Biden, and he did speak his mind on what he thought the president should do in the case of Julian Assange. There's only one thing to do. Don't wait for the outcome of the extradition case in London. Just drop the charges. It's the only right thing to do. And the same message and the same understanding we felt and we got from Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia. in a country where finally they have elected a progressive president. We also met Luis Arce, the president of Bolivia, who knows what we're up against and committed himself to full support. We met Alberto Fernandez, the president of Argentina, who said, yes, we are for it. I will do anything individually and collectively to help Julian Assange. Same did his vice president, Kristin. And we know of the support of others, other presidents, like Boris in Chile, and Xiomara Castro in Honduras. All the major countries south of the United States borders are now on the highest level supporting Julian Assange and the fight for his freedom. An entire continent. So we are not alone. We are not a few hundred people. We are millions. The combined population of these countries exceeds the population of the European Union without the United Kingdom. And this is growing. We will go from continent to continent and we will spread the message. And I will assure you that more and more will come on board, because there's an understanding, even though there's electors to admit it here, that this is a political persecution, a horrible one, a torture against one individual, and are the gravest threat against press freedom in our times, that we have to fight. We have to fight against it. Of evidence to support the case that Julian Assange is a political prisoner and that he is politically persecuted. I mentioned the plan to kidnap or assassinate Julian in 2017. There was always also the bugging in the embassy where his meetings with lawyers were recorded secretly, and legally protected material was stolen. There's a case in Madrid where the evidence has been presented in writing and with testimony. And investigative judges in Madrid, they want to hear from Mike Pompeo, who was the head of the CIA in 2017, about his involvement in these crimes, because these are crimes. He certainly is a criminal. But the Department of Justice in the United States has not even answered the authorities in Madrid when they are sending a request that they want to take a witness statement from Mike Pompeo, who now has an ambition to be the next president of the United States of America. So help us God. I am fascinated by the fact that we're having our books, all kinds of books, where people are exposing themselves. I'm not going to name the one here from The Prince, but I haven't even read it, and I'm probably not going to do that. But another prince, yes, the dark prince on the other side, Mike Pompeo, has also published a book, I think about 10 days ago, where he admits to the political nature of the persecution of Julian Assange. He admits it openly. He says, I lobbied the Ecuadorian government as Secretary of State in the US to hand over Julian Assange. I lobbied them. Well, we know what kind of lobbying that is. You might have seen the film Godfather, where the Godfather Corleone says, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. That's the kind of lobbying they push against Ecuador in that country. Sticks and carrots. We don't know what they threatened. We don't know what these sticks entailed. The offer that you cannot refuse. But we know what the other side of it was. Billions of dollars in aid to the despicable president, Lenin Moreno, in that country, who handed Julian over for billions of dollars. That's a lot of carrots. And this all is admitted in a book by the former Secretary of State and the former head of the CIA. And he admits in that book that he massively as CIA Director and Secretary of State, pushed the Department of Justice to issue an indictment against Julian and go after him with full force. So much for the independence of the Department of Justice. So much for this to be just another legal case. It's a political persecution. You have it in black and white. You have it in admittance by the former Secretary of State. Don't bother buying that bloody book. The best captured will be in a legal document on a large file that will be presented in the courts here in the extradition hearing when it finally happens. Thank you for this day. It gives me joy to see you here together. It gives me joy that we can send this message to Belmarsh prison. We are on the winning side. We are on the right side of history. We are the ones who understand the justice. You are the good people. We will win in the end. Thank you.
Can we give a lot of love and an extra big round of applause, as Jeremy said, a sort of virtual embrace for Stella Assange?
Everyone. Everyone's basically covered everything. Can I show the scarf? Vivian made this, and it's about Julian. Vivian's written point by point the injustices about Julian's case, and we miss her dearly. And Vivian was such a courageous person, and she was really a leader. And it got me thinking about how important each and impactful courageous people are. You know, whether they're someone high profile like Julian or Vivian Westwood, or just a regular person, they have the capacity to lead and to compel. And campaigning isn't just about going on a march every few months. It's a daily thing, you know. It's about telling everyone you know, finding the right occasion, but telling people about what you care about and why you care about it. Simple as that. It's not about slogans. I think recently there's been a lot of progress in the campaign. I mean, it's been building and building, and the October Hands Around Parliament was absolutely amazing, and today again has been extraordinary. I mean, I was looking back, we were behind the banner, and as far as the eye could see, there was this incredible carnival, and I was watching the people who were just, going out about the town on a Saturday evening, and the response was so positive. Everyone was filming, they were trying to find out what it was about, they were engaged, and I think this carnival has had an enormous impact on central London today. So yes, we were thousands marching, and many thousands more who saw the message and who are now interested and want to find out more. So thank you. And tell all your friends and colleagues and family about what a success this was today, and encourage them to come next time, because we need to build and build until the movement is so big. Those in power and the courts realize there's nowhere else to go but to free Julian. There's been some really wonderful events. The Belmarsh Tribunal that Jeremy Corbyn was talking about was a huge success. The press club was ram-packed. It was, and the speakers were fabulous. And I think Julian's case is impossible to ignore anymore. And it might be the case that for the media, this is being ignored here in this country, but sorry. In a way, it's because it's bigger than them. They don't know how to talk about it because it is bigger than them. And then eventually we have the joint statement by the five publications, which is a huge step forward. And I think there's a complete consensus within the media that Julian should not be extradited and that he should be freed. But the media should be speaking louder. But regardless, WikiLeaks 13 years ago started a revolution in the media. And it became bigger than The Guardian, bigger than the New York Times, bigger than Der Spiegel, right? And that's partly why Julian was attacked by those very publications in the beginning, because WikiLeaks journalism had surpassed by a long shot what those publications had achieved in how they were doing things. And it started a revolution that we can see now. There's so much independent media. People get their news from many sources, not just one and not just the official one. And that's a healthy development. And that's in large part thanks to Julian. Julian also, through WikiLeaks, privileged the truth over commentary. Commentary is fine as long as it's based on the truth. So there have been many very good events, the Belmarsh Tribunal, and I've been doing things like speaking to a very interesting organization that's small but has a very good purpose, which is to demilitarize education, to stop arms companies from funding research at universities. And there's also the environmental groups who have become aware of what WikiLeaks has done to publish, to expose how oil companies and so on, lobby countries to take policies that are detrimental to the environment and to the countries, detrimental to each country's individual self-interest out of, for political expediency. So there are different movements that are becoming aware of Julian's importance and relevance of the WikiLeaks publications, and that actually that Julian's imprisonment is an attempt to punish the messenger for uncomfortable truths that affect all of us in many different areas of life. I think you probably most want to hear how Julian's doing. And he's in a difficult situation, and he's a very strong person. And he's human. And that means that there are good days and there are bad days. Good days is probably an overstatement, but sometimes it's easier to cope than others. And just this week, we were on the phone, and he told me that the cell above him had been flooding. So it was dripping into his cell. And specifically, there were several leaks coming onto his bed. And I asked him, well, how are you going to sleep? Because they had, the prison guards had put some buckets or something on the bed to collect the leaks. He had 3 buckets on the bed, and they weren't all in one corner, they were like in different parts of the bed. And I said, so how are you going to sleep? And he said, well, maybe if I contort my body and do like an L shape, then maybe I can sleep on the bed. And then the next day, he said the water had evaporated, but had formed some stalagmites. So this kind of cementy water had evaporated and then formed these like cement pyramids or something like that in these buckets. So that's Julian's day-to-day existence. That's what he has to deal with apart from fighting this enormous legal battle. And that's the reality of a place like Belmarsh. He shouldn't be there. And I think part of the reason why the movement to free him has so much force behind it is because it goes to very basic instincts. Because we're human beings, because we can reason, we can distinguish justice from injustice. And what Julian's going through, what's being done to Julian, is such an enormous injustice that whoever is denying it because they are part of the problem. They are part of the ones who have, for some reason, in some way, are taking part in his torture. I wanted to end in an upbeat way. And that is that I'm convinced that we will win this. There's no other way. The politicians, those in charge, they know this is a political case. They know the courts know this is a political case. It's a bit embarrassing for them, right? It's embarrassing because it is a political case. And now they've got themselves in a position where it's clear that the law has been abused, that the UK is keeping the most important political prisoner, well, the most famous and one of the most significant cases of political imprisonment in history. is right here in London. And they have to find a way out. And the louder we shout, and the more we grow, the quicker Julian will be released. So I ask you to keep on campaigning for Julian, not just in the protests, but day to day, keeping on your mind, think about what you can do. And also, if you're not on the don'textraditeassange.com email list, please sign up. Read Neil Smeltzer's book, The Trials of Julian Assange. Read Stefania Marizzi's book, The Secret Power. And stay engaged, and I'll see you again.
And we want to thank you all again. You're all amazing and special. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your amazing energy, your love, and thank you for being on the right side of history. And I'm sure we'll see many of you in a couple of weeks on the Peace demo, and we look forward to seeing you at more Julian Actions, and a huge thank you for all you're doing. And thank you again to Manuela and everyone who's been organizing this beautiful event.